It is the middle of the night in York, Pennsylvania. The 1850s, a freight car rolls quietly along the railroad tracks. Inside that car, hidden behind a false wall, a family is holding its breath. If they are discovered, they go back to the South, back to slavery, back to a world where they are not considered people. They are considered property, and there is no second chance. But the man who owns this railroad, every single car, every route, every hidden compartment inside those freight cars, he knows. He knows what it feels like to be owned. Because William C. Goodridge, the man who built this railroad, was born into slavery. By the 1850s, Goodridge was one of the wealthiest black men in all of Pennsylvania. He owned property across the city. He owned a railroad, a 5-story building, a cosmetics brand, a dozen rental properties, and a secret that could destroy him. Because what William Goodridge was hiding inside those freight cars was not merchandise. It was people. Fleeing toward freedom. This is the story of a man who turned a real railroad into the Underground Railroad, and the world simply forgot he ever existed. The fact that you have never heard his name is not an accident. It is the final chapter of the injustice done to William Goodridge. William Goodridge was born in 1,806 inches, Baltimore, Maryland. His mother was an enslaved woman. His father was most likely white. His grandmother had been the property of Charles Carroll of Carrollton, one of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence. Think about that for a moment. A man who signed a document declaring all men are created equal owned William's own grandmother. When William was 5 or 6 years old, he was taken from his mother and sent north to York, Pennsylvania to work for his keep. He was indentured to a tanner named Reverend Dunn. William spent his childhood working the vats. He had no choice in the matter. York sits just 20 miles north of the Mason-Dixon line. That is the border between the free North and the slave-holding South, 20 miles from freedom. And for the next 10 years, William Goodridge worked that tannery, waiting for a life of his very own. Then, in 1822, Reverend Dunn went bankrupt. Just like that, at the age of 16, William Goodridge was free. Nobody fought for him. He was not freed because the law changed or because someone showed mercy. His master simply ran out of money. That was the reason. But here is the thing about William Goodridge. He did not just walk away from slavery. He walked straight towards something bigger. He traveled to Marietta, a nearby town along the Susquehanna River, and learned a trade that would change his life: barbering. In 1824, at just 18 years old, he returned to York and opened his own barbershop on Center Square, the heart of the town. 3 years later, he married Evelina Wallace from Baltimore. She was not just his wife, she was his equal partner in everything. And together, the two of them were about to build something that no one in the entire city of York, Pennsylvania had ever seen. It started with the barbershop. Goodridge did not just cut hair. He expanded into candy, cosmetics, jewelry, and children's toys. He created his own baldness treatment and called it Oil of Celsus. He sold it to barbers in over a dozen cities across the East. The glass bottles were stamped York, Pennsylvania. It was one of the first consumer products to ever carry that city's imprint. Stay with me here. A formerly enslaved man was building a consumer brand in the 1830s. That was practically unheard of. Then came real estate. Goodridge started buying properties across York. By 1856, he owned at least 12 buildings in town alone. He opened a variety store next to his barbershop, then an employment agency, then a bathhouse. Each venture fed the next venture. In 1838, the railroad arrived in York. It connected Baltimore to the north. Goodridge looked at those tracks and saw his future. By 1842, he launched the Reliance Line, his own freight delivery service. 13 rail cars serving 22 towns across the state, a black man, born into slavery, now running a railroad in antebellum America. Let that image sit with you for just a single moment. But Goodridge was not finished. In 1847, he built Center Hall, a 5-story building on York's main square, the tallest in the city, 5 stories. Built by a man who just 25 years earlier had been considered someone else's property, not a citizen, property. Center Hall housed a tavern on the ground floor, a newspaper called The Democrat, and on the top floors, a photography studio. That studio was run by his son, Glenalvin Goodridge. Glenalvin was among the first black photographers in the entire United States. So by the mid-1850s, picture this. William Goodridge owns the tallest building in York, a railroad, a cosmetics brand. He owns a dozen properties. He is one of the wealthiest black men in south-central Pennsylvania. His clients include powerful whites. His close friend is Frederick Douglass, the most famous abolitionist in all of America. Goodridge invited Douglass to speak in York. From the outside, this looked like the American dream with one impossible twist. A former slave had built an empire from nothing, but underneath it all, beneath the wealth, the buildings, and the railroad cars, Goodridge was hiding something deeply dangerous. A secret so dangerous that if anyone discovered it, he would lose everything: his fortune, his freedom, and possibly his very life. To understand what Goodridge was doing in secret, you have to understand what the United States looked like in the year 1850. That year, Congress passed the Fugitive Slave Act, and with one stroke of a pen, everything in the free North changed overnight. Before 1850, if an enslaved person escapes to a free state like Pennsylvania, local communities would sometimes offer protection. The Fugitive Slave Act made it a federal crime to help anyone who had escaped from slavery, even in free states. No exceptions. Every citizen was now required by law to assist in capturing runaways. Refuse, and you faced heavy fines and time behind bars. In border states like Maryland, the price of enslaved people jumped 35% overnight. Kidnapping became a business. One notorious kidnapper in Philadelphia later admitted to seizing roughly 100 free black people and selling them southward. York sat just 20 miles from the Maryland border. Slave catchers moved freely through the area. Goodridge knew what that meant. So here is what he did. Underneath the kitchen of his home at 123 East Philadelphia Street, there was a hand-dug hiding place, a secret room carved into the earth. It was discovered during renovations decades later. This is where he sheltered the desperate. Goodridge hid freedom seekers in his own home, beneath his own kitchen floor. But the house was just a temporary stop along the way. The real escape route was his railroad, the Reliance Line. Those 13 freight cars had false bottoms and hidden compartments. Goodridge would move people from the hiding place under his kitchen into the concealed spaces of his rail cars heading eastward. From York, the cars traveled to Philadelphia, where the fugitives could continue north toward New York, New England, or Canada. The term Underground Railroad is believed to have originated right here in the Susquehanna Valley, where people simply vanished. But for William Goodridge, the Underground Railroad was not a metaphor. It was not a figure of speech. It was his actual railroad. And because of the secrecy required to keep everyone alive, we may never know exactly how many lives he saved along that route. But we do know about 2 specific nights when Goodridge's railroad changed the course of American history. The first was in 1851, September 11th, 1851. Not New York, not a plane, a farmhouse in the small town of Christiana, Pennsylvania, 40 miles east. A Maryland slaveholder named Edward Gorsuch crossed the Mason-Dixon line with a federal marshal and armed men to reclaim his property. 4 men who had escaped his plantation were hiding in the home of William Parker, a free black man and local community leader. Parker refused to surrender them. His wife Eliza blew a large horn from the upstairs window. It was a signal to the neighborhood. Within minutes, dozens of armed black residents surrounded the house. They were not going to let Gorsuch take those men. Not today. Confrontation turned to violence. When the smoke cleared, Edward Gorsuch had lost his life. His son was wounded. The posse fled. This moment became known as the Christiana Resistance. Some historians consider it one of the first confrontations of the Civil War. Parker and the freedom seekers needed to vanish. Federal marshals and 45 United States Marines were already on their way. They fled west through the countryside at night. They were heading to York, to the one man with the means to get them out safely. William Goodridge had known William Parker for years. Some evidence suggests Goodridge may have helped Parker escape slavery himself. Now, with the full weight of the federal government hunting Parker, Goodridge hid him and loaded him onto a Reliance Line freight car. Parker reached Philadelphia and then Rochester, New York, where Frederick Douglass personally arranged his safe passage into Canada. Back in Pennsylvania, the government charged 41 people with treason. At trial, the jury deliberated for just 15 minutes. Not guilty. Every single charge was eventually dropped. The South was outraged. The North quietly celebrated what had just happened. But Goodridge's role in the escape remained a secret. He went back to his businesses, back to his railroad, and then it happened again. October 1859. John Brown led his famous raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He tried to launch an armed uprising against slavery itself. The raid failed. Brown was captured and later hanged. Most of his men lost their lives, but one man survived and managed to escape. His name was Osborne Perry Anderson, the only black man to make it out of Harper's Ferry alive. He fled north through Pennsylvania. Exhausted and hunted, Anderson later wrote about what happened next. He described arriving in York and being taken in by a stranger. He wrote that a good Samaritan gave him aid and shelter. Anderson never named the man in print, but historians later confirmed it. The Good Samaritan of York, Pennsylvania, was William Goodridge. The same man, the same house, the same railroad. 8 years later, Goodridge hid Anderson and sent him east by rail to Philadelphia and then onwards to Canada, following the very same route as Parker. Anderson survived. He later wrote his memoir, the only first-hand account from inside John Brown's raid ever published by a survivor. Two of the most explosive events in the entire abolitionist movement both ran through the same house and the same man in York. But the cost of courage was already mounting. In December of 1852, Evelina Goodridge passed away from a heart condition. She was gone. Her obituary described her as an equal partner in her husband's businesses. Without Evelina, things began to come apart at the seams. The Panic of 1857 hit the nation hard. Goodridge, who had used his own properties to guarantee loans for others, was left exposed. In 1858, he defaulted on his debts. The sheriff auctioned off everything he owned. Every property, every rail car, even his own home. The man who had once owned the tallest building in all of York, Pennsylvania, went back to the only trade he knew, cutting hair. Then came one final blow. In 1862, a white woman accused his eldest son, Glenalvin, the photographer, of a crime he did not commit. Glenalvin had been in another town entirely on the day the alleged crime took place. An all-white jury convicted him all the same. William never stopped fighting for his son. In 1865, the governor finally granted a pardon, but only if the family left the state. So the Goodridges left Pennsylvania behind. William moved to Michigan to be near his children, then eventually on to Minneapolis. On the first day of 1873, William C. Goodridge passed away in Minneapolis. He was 66 years old. He had nothing to his name, no railroad, no five-story building, no fortune of any kind. The man who risked everything to free others left this world with nothing. And for more than 100 years after that, almost nobody told his story. His name faded from the history books almost completely. But the house at 123 East Philadelphia Street in York is still standing. The walls that sheltered fugitives are still there today. In the 1990s, during building renovations, workers discovered the hidden panel beneath the kitchen. The room was real. In 1998, the National Park Service designated the Goodridge House a National Historic Landmark and added it to the network to Freedom. In the year 2000, a mural appeared on West Market Street in York, 24 feet wide, 23 feet tall, his face looking out. In 2016, the house opened as the Goodridge Freedom Center and Underground Railroad Museum. It is the only such museum in all of York. Today, a public school in York bears his name. The William C. Goodridge Academy, serving students from the 6th through 12th grade. Visitors to the museum can stand in the very same room where freedom seekers once hid in the darkness beneath the Goodridge kitchen. But here is what should stay with you long after this story ends. How many people like William Goodridge has history simply forgotten? A man born as property, who built himself into one of the wealthiest black businessmen in his region, who used every dollar for others. He used every rail car, every brick, every ounce of influence he had to move people from bondage to freedom, and he lost everything. Not because he failed at business, not because he made poor choices. He lost everything because he chose to fight for what was right. His name was William C. Goodridge, and now, for the first time, you know it. Do not let his story disappear from memory once again. If this story moved you, leave a comment. Tell me who else deserves to be remembered. And subscribe so you do not miss the next one.